something we'd love to, work with Tom about it. And Keith, director, she's so experienced doing this, not his last name. Keith,
Well, good afternoon. Good to see all of y'all. I know this is a little different room than we usually meet in, but the rooms are scarce this year, and therefore for this committee too, and also because it can be kind of a heavy lift to listen to a lot of this very good work that y'all do, but when we start having public comment, it can kind of get us a little glazed over if we do both together. So we're going to do 2 of the agencies today and 2 tomorrow, just for the goodness of all. A lot of our members are juggling committee meetings, so we'll be in and out. We'll all do the best we can to listen, or I'll give them homework to catch up on what they missed, okay? So if we could just begin just a moment with a word of prayer, please. Dear Heavenly Father, I'd ask that you come bathe this room with your spirit and help us as we listen closely and to discern clearly the challenges that particularly fall in these places. Help us to remember the people that we are here to serve at all times. In your name we pray, amen. Okay, the tracking sheets are full for the members here, so they represent everything. So if you will start on page 4, I believe is where we'll start with the Department of Human Services, who we will begin with, Commissioner Crittenden.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for this opportunity to come before you to discuss the Governor's budget proposal for fiscal year 2020 for the Department of Human Services. My name is Robin Crittenden, and I'm the DHS Commissioner. Members of my executive leadership team are with me today, and Interim Director Tom Rawlings is here with his team to present the Division of Family and Children Services portion of the Governor's recommendations. Our vision at the Department of Human Services is to build stronger families for a stronger Georgia. With that in mind, here's how we will use our resources to accomplish our goals, adhere to the laws governing our programs, and hold ourselves accountable to the public trust. DHS has about $1.7 billion allocated to protect and serve Georgia's vulnerable populations. Accounting for DHS and its attached entities, the total FY 2019 budget allocation is $1.9 billion. Now, to turn to the recommendations that Governor Kemp released on January 17th. Overall, for DHS, Governor Kemp is requesting $825.3 million in state funds for fiscal year 2020. This amounts to $28.4 million additional dollars. This includes common changes or statewide adjustments included in all agency budget requests. I will discuss the DHS budget recommendations, and Interim Director Rawlings will address the DFAC's budget recommendations in a few moments. For fiscal year 2020, under departmental administration, the Governor is requesting an increase of $1.8 million for Peach Care for Kids under Georgia Gateway. This is on the House tracking sheet line 28.8.6. This adjustment reflects a reduction in the preliminary enhanced federal Medicaid assistance percentage under the Affordable Care Act. House tracking line 28.8.7 reflects the transfer of $883,000 for TeamWorks billings to the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency, or GVRA, which aligns each agency's budget with projected expenditures. The Governor's recommendations for fiscal year 2020 will also help DHS better serve vulnerable populations by providing resources to support older and disabled adults and ensure that vulnerable children and adults are safer. This includes House Tracking Line 28.9.4, which recommends $957,000 to add 12 adult protective services workers to help reduce caseloads. APS currently has 155 case managers. Adding 12 will take that number up to 167. The average monthly worker to caseload ratio is 1 to 27. Adding 12 workers will lower the ratio to 1 to 25. The national standard is 1 to 15. House Tracking Line 28.9.5 contains $366,000 to add 5 public guardianship workers to reduce caseloads. Our public guardianship office has 34 case managers. Adding 5 will take that number up to 39. During December, PGO had 859 people under public guardianship for a caseload ratio of 1 to 25. Adding 5 workers will lower the ratio to 1 to 22. The national standard is 1 to 20. House Tracking Line 28.10.4 recommends $945,000 to help reduce waiting lists for home-delivered meals. As of January 10th, approximately 2,700 people were on waiting lists for home-delivered meals. These additional funds would provide 129,299 meals, serving 515 more clients per year. Finally, House Tracking Line 28.10.5 recommends $1,898,000 to fund 1,000 additional slots for home and community-based services, reducing the wait list for seniors seeking non-Medicaid services, including respite care, personal support, homemakers, adult daycare, and emergency response systems. Turning to the next slide, House Tracking Line number 28.11.4 recommends $338,000 to support Georgia's Aging and Disability Resource Connection, or ADRC. The ADRC is the No Wrong Door access to long-term care services and supports. It is a system of partnering organizations dedicated to supporting individuals who are aging or living with a disability, as well as their family members. It provides information about long-term supports and services which can be both publicly and privately financed. The recommendation includes a position for an options counselor and a position for a data analyst, both at new fringe rates, and it also includes money for marketing the program. In addition, the governor is recommending a continuation of funding from the amended fiscal year 19 budget to support the ongoing maintenance of the trail system for a residential child care licensing unit. This funding will also support adding a position for compliance monitoring. House Tracking Line 28.16.4 has $101,000 in additional funds for residential child care licensing to pay for the ongoing maintenance of the trail system. This system makes tracking facilities, processing applications for licensure, and reporting incidents more efficient, and keeps the public and referral sources informed on the performance of those facilities and programs. This system will be key for the Family First Prevention Services Act that Interim Director Rawlings will discuss in a minute. Also, for our licensing unit, House Tracking Line 28.16.5 recommends $69,000 in additional funds for a compliance officer in the residential child care licensing unit. RCCL staff ensure that facilities and programs operate at acceptable levels as mandated by state statutes and by rules and regulations. An additional compliance monitor will allow RCCL to meet business standards for timely processing of complaint and incident reports. This too will be extremely critical when Family First goes into effect. Finally, the governor is recommending $883,000 reflected in House Tracking Line 28.22.6. This is the transfer from DHS Departmental Administration to GVRA Departmental Administration to reflect the adjustment in Teamworks billings. That completes the DHS portion of the governor's budget recommendations. And now Interim Director Rawlings will speak to you about the DFAC's recommendations, and we'll be glad to answer any of your questions after his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Madam Chair, members of the committee, let's jump right in. For fiscal year 2020, if you'll start at House Tracking Line 28.1.4, we have a couple of changes to the adoption services. The primary of those is about $500,000 additional for a 4.2% growth in the adoption services. Remember, please, that our adoption services budget goes not only to assist us in adopting the approximately 1,400 children who at any given time are free for adoption, but also supporting those children who have been adopted, who have special needs or in sibling groups, whose families are receiving adoption assistance until they are able to get grown and get on with their lives. There's also a $145,000 charge, $600 charge for an adjustment of the FMAP percentage. Other substantial changes are on the next page. Several of these do involve the Family First Prevention Services Act, as Commissioner Crittenden noted earlier. This act, of course, as I've said a number of times, is the most significant change to our federal child welfare system and laws and policies in the last 30 years. It requires us to make significant changes in our operating structure, in our business structure, in our IT, and it also requires us to work very closely with our providers so that they can make those changes as well and can continue to serve the 200 and some odd thousand children whose lives we touch each year. First, if you start on House Tracking 28.6.6 and following, first is $3 million for information technology. This will be matched by an additional $3 million in federal funds, and this is part of a 4-year request. We have to, as I said, change our system so that we can better track the information we will need to be able to collect the federal funds that are allowed for prevention and that are allowed for the changes in the congregate care services we provide. So that will be a significant change. $438,000, a little bit over that, for a specific team. When you are implementing a project as big as Family First, we not only need our internal folks to be up to speed on it and to change our internal policies, practices, and systems, but we also need to be able to work very carefully with our provider community as well as with the other agencies. Every child serving agency in the state of Georgia will be affected significantly by this law, and of course, as the main child serving agency, it's up to us to really, I think, help lead that charge. So this is what that's for. Increasing funds for about $867,000 to continue child care placement. When we ask families to take in their relative children, they often are not expecting this. It is a service to the people of Georgia, and it is a service to those children who are in need. But oftentimes the families who are taking in their cousins and grandchildren and nieces and nephews work for a living, and they need assistance in getting child care. This helps us improve our ability to provide child care for those families so that they can do the right thing by their own family members. Another is $427,000 on line 28.6.9, which is, as you can imagine, we have a lot of contracted providers in the state of Georgia. To do right by the people of Georgia, we have to be able to track the quality of the goods and services we are requesting. And so we actually need an additional team of about 5 people to help us in that. So the governor has kindly recommended that increase. And then finally, on $940,000 for a pilot team to do something that I've been wanting to do for some time, which is do some audit and quality assurance follow-up on cases we have closed. The dilemma we run into as an agency is that we can go in and work with a family. Most of the families we work with, of course, the children are remaining in the home, and we're working with the family to work through the family's issues. When we think we've done a good job and we close those cases, we need to go back and check after 6-9 months to make sure that the work we did, in fact, helped the family. That way we can improve our quality over the long haul. On the next slide, simply, this is the same 28.6.11, and this is additional, just really a redirection of current funds from personnel services primarily, so that we can do more to support our ability to recruit and retain both relative caregivers and foster caregivers. Of course, if you look at our foster care population, approximately a third of those children are with relatives, a third are with our own defects foster homes, and a third are with our private or child placement agency foster homes. So going on to another issue, which is slightly different, 28.13.5 on your tracking sheet. Aged, blind, and disabled Medicaid is one of the areas in which we as an agency have struggled to get the eligibility in a way that is timely and accurate, so that these individuals especially, who are some of our most, I think they're over 50% of our Medicaid population, and they really need our help. We need to have an additional 50 workers so that we can process those eligibility applications as soon as possible so we can get funds to these folks. And of course, that'll be matched by federal funds as well. Another issue is going to be our out-of-home care. You'll see there a big number, which is a continuation of the federal amended fiscal year 19. So adding $9.88 million and then a FMAP adjustment of 116. We have been successful since July in reducing the numbers of children in foster care by about 5%. However, y'all were kind enough to recognize that those who provide care for our foster children needed some additional financial support. So these additional funds will help us make sure we are able to pay those per diems to the relative and foster caregivers, and also, especially, I think, something that's close to my heart is to make sure that we can provide adequate care for those children who are in a special need of behavioral health services. These often have to be in special placements, and we as the state often end up having to pay for those. Those are the changes that I have, and I'm sure that Commissioner and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, thank y'all. I appreciate it very much. I think this shows some hard work and some great goals to reach for. We do have one question, Chairman Benton, maybe more.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rollins, on tracking document line 2866 for increasing funds for the shines.
Yes, sir.
You got $3 million.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me how much, since this project has been in existence, how much in state funds we have spent?
That's a good question. The actual Shines project has been in existence for over 10 years now. It's been a contract that Accenture has helped us over the last 10 years to build out our SACWIS system. Cliff can perhaps give you a little bit more background.
When the Shine system was originally built, it cost approximately $40 million. It was implemented in 2008. We have a maintenance contract with a IT vendor, which is a base amount of just around $5 million each year. Sometimes we're able to find a few extra dollars here and there to add to that contract. That would probably, over the last, since 10 years, we certainly have over $50 million in maintenance on top of the $40 million
So about $90 million,
Yes, sir. And
give or take a million. Give or take $1 million.
Yeah.
Okay.
Representative, these particular changes, some of them are associated with the Family First. There are also, the federal government from time to time decides that it wants us to treat data differently. And when we have to implement, so there are some things called AFCARS Rule 2.0. There's a CWIS system. These are federal requirements that we have to essentially bring our system up to par for them. And so that's what this particular project, I would suggest, is a 24 million, if overall, 24 million 4-year project.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Chairman Oliver, Ms. Representative Oliver, I think you were next, maybe? I'm not sure.
I have a question for Commissioner Crittenden and one for Mr. Rollins, if I may. If I'm reading the budget document correctly, for the elder abuse investigations and additional monies and Meals on Wheels, is there a federal match for those? It doesn't look like there's a federal match.
There is not.
So the federal policy is to match child abuse expenses, but not to match elder abuse expenses.
Correct.
Mr. Rollins, the addition for adoption services that you propose, I'm assuming that's for additional cases. That's not an adoption per diem increase.
That's correct. A lot of this is it's a growth in the caseload, including adoption assistance and adoption services, home studies, incentives, and that sort of thing.
That means that we're adopting more children, which is one of the highest values.
We have over the last couple of years, Representative Oliver, gone from about 700 a year to this past year we were completed about 1,200 adoptions. And I think if you consider the with the growth we had in foster care caseloads in the last 6 years, certainly you're going to see as a result of that
increase.
a reaction.
I spoke with Mr. O'Connor before the meeting began about getting me further documentation on the discrepancy of per diems between relatives and foster care parents, but it's also true that the adoption assistance grants are considerably lower than foster care and relative placement. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, and this issue has come up recently, in that we, it's to some extent no good deed goes unpunished or unintended consequences. Y'all are very kind to recognize the needs of those who are fostering their children and relative children. But if our ultimate goal is to have permanence in adoption as part of that plan, then we don't want to be stuck in a bind, which we sometimes find ourselves, in which the family can receive greater financial support by continuing to foster than they could if they were to adopt the child.
I wanted to point that out to the subcommittee members, Madam Chair, because I think there's a lot of work to be done on this per diem issue and what it reflects in terms of our policies. Are our policies consistent with the federal law or not? If you look at the per diem discrepancy, they're inconsistent with the federal law.
So we'll have to do some catch up on this, I think, as we go forward.
Thank you, Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Representative Donahue?
Could I ask a couple questions?
Sure.
If we look at 28.6.8, increased funds to replace federal funds, who are the priority families? How are they picked and who are they?
I should know the actual details on that. I'd have to ask one of my experts, but essentially what we're talking about is when we have children who are in our custody and we as you can imagine, we can't get folks to take care of children unless we can say we're going to help you by providing child care. Because one of the things I've learned in the last few years, because I never had to pay child care, thank goodness, I was fortunate my wife was at home. But child care has gotten expensive, especially if it's quality rated child care. Right. And so when we made some changes shifting some of the work around the decal, we lost some of our internal ability to sort of really expedite those applications and expedite those payments. So we're kind of trying to build our team back up to be able to do that well.
So basically, again, on the question, how are they selected, priority families?
The priority families are, when we place kids into foster care, both working and non-working foster parents are eligible for child care. What we often find, though, is that there can be delays before our workers enter into our computer system and gets transmitted to DECAL. DECAL, their interpretation of law is that they can't pay retroactively. So we sometimes end up with foster parents who we place the child with them, especially in the first month. They can't access the child care because of the time it takes to move through the system. So what we're trying to do is fully fund the work of our frontline staff to expedite as quickly as they can, getting that child care information into our automated system so it goes over to
Yeah.
DECAL. I would like to add that although it doesn't show up in our budget, DECAL tells us they're now spending $52 million a year on child care for DFAC's clients and where we refer to them. So they have mainly foster parents, but there's sometimes families that are in other crises that we will identify for them and then refer those families over to them.
And maybe a better way to say that, it's maybe not reflected completely accurately, is to prioritize quick payment for these families.
Thank you. One more follow-up, Ms. Chair, if you don't mind.
Sure.
On 28.10.4, what is the current wait list for Meals on Wheels? Ms. Craig.
The current wait list for home-delivered meals is roughly 2,700, and for congregate meals, it's about 650.
Okay, and how much will the new funding reduce? Did I hear maybe the wait list by 515? Was that the
Correct.
correct number? Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Reeves.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Piggybacking off of Representative Donahue's question a second ago, what exactly, in order to speed up the entrance of this data into the computer, what do y'all need? Is it appropriation? Is it technology, additional staff? What exactly do y'all need to get that done?
My understanding is staff. When we transferred the function, as you can imagine, you know, the staffing got lost in translation, perhaps. You know, you shift dollars around, you shift staff around. So we realized that we really need to maintain or really rebuild that internal staffing function so that we can help them. DECAL does a great job once we get them the information they need. We've got to get it to them faster.
Okay, yeah, and just to echo or affirm the reality of the cost of child care, I mean, my wife and I have a 3.5-year-old right now, and he goes 3 days a week, and it's like $1,000 a month. It's incredible how expensive it is, and yeah, I would want to do anything that I could do to help a foster parent not to have to endure that even for 1 month. I think it's a great priority and something that we need to really look at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the committee? Not seeing any, I will say thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. We're going to go into our next hearing and then have time for comment from anyone else who's here and have some concerns or asks or anything else for us. So next we have Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. And I'm not sure, are you speaking, Director Casey? Are you? Great. I meant to ask you that. I'm sorry, exactly who would be speaking. Great. What do you think about a different?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today regarding the governor's recommended state fiscal year 2020 budget. 2 weeks ago, I had the privilege of sharing with you the information on all 5 of our statutory programs that fall under the GVRA umbrella, and bragging on the accomplishments of our clients, our partners, and coworkers. Having already taken advantage of that opportunity, today I will be brief and direct and immediately discuss the governor's recommendations. However, it's always a pleasure to answer any questions that anyone may have. First, I refer you today to the information from pages 214, 215, and 219 of the governor's budget. My first slide reflects current and proposed allocations for state fiscal year 2020. The proposed budget includes an increase of $2,713 for the Business Enterprise Program. The BEP program provides small business opportunities for vendors who are blind, like our vendors in CLOB, first floor here at the state capitol, and also the Twin Towers. The recommended increase encompasses provisions for merit pay or merit-based pay adjustments and employee recruitment and retention initiatives, as well as a decrease to reflect an adjustment in our share of state health benefit plan premiums and also Department of Administrative Service self-insurance programs. Next, the recommendation for administration is an increase of $755,677. This amount includes merit-based pay adjustments, an increase to employers' share of the teacher retirement system, an increase in cyber insurance premiums, and a transfer from the Department of Human Services for TeamWorks billing. It also includes decreases for adjustment to the State Health Benefit Program contributions, DOAS self-insurance, and TeamWorks billing. Next, you'll see with the Disability Adjudication Services, DAS, this operates under an agreement with Social Security Administration and again receives 0 state dollars. Therefore, you'll see no change. Next, Georgia Industries for the Blind, GIB. This is our manufacturing facility with locations in Bainbridge, Griffin, and Warner Robins, and operates off the sales of product and services. This program also receives no state or federal funding, so you'll see no change. It's flat at 0. The largest of our programs, VR Vocational Rehabilitation, sees a recommended increase of $126,865. This amount includes an increase for merit-based raises and decrease reflecting adjustments in state health benefit plan premiums and DOAS self-insurance. Bottom line, you see reflect a total of increase of $885,255, bringing our total proposed state budget to $23,322,585. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, that is our budget, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Okay, Chairman Ben.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How are you today?
I've had my afternoon coffee. I'm excellent.
All right. Well, at least you're awake. I don't drink coffee. I need something a little stronger than that. Diet Pepsi usually wakes me up. I had a question about something that was brought to my attention a while back. Y'all had a conference in November, correct?
A leadership conference in November, yes, sir.
Okay. Could you tell me how many employees attended that conference?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head, sir, but I would say at least anywhere from around 200, 225. That's about a fair estimate.
And you stayed at the Westin, right?
In Savannah, that is correct.
Pretty nice hotel. Could you give me some idea of the cost of that event?
I cannot give you an idea of the cost of the event off the top of my head now. I'd be more than happy to provide that to you before close of business today.
Okay. Where does that come out of the budget, your budget?
It comes out of,
That amount comes from vocational rehabilitation as well as ed,
Mm-hmm.
because some of the employees they work under the VR program, so it's attached to their, the department that they're working in.
Okay. So you stayed at a hotel that the average is about $225 a night. You had 200 people. That's a pretty good conference.
I would, if I may, real quickly, sir, I hear the word conference. This is also an opportunity for my coworkers to receive credit. These are counselors who are receiving yearly recommended,
Right.
not recommended, required credits that is federally mandated, state mandated for them to
Okay.
acquire.
Could you have done that in Atlanta instead,
Uh,
in-house?
We have moved the conference around the state.
Okay,
It has been in Atlanta, it's been in Stone Mountain. We've also done it in Savannah. We move it around so that way we're not forcing coworkers to keep traveling to Atlanta,
Mhm.
trying to accommodate, be as fair as possible.
okay. One more question, Madam Chair. Also, heard that GVRA is paying out-of-state tuition for students. Can I ask why?
I believe you're referring to the post-secondary education program, the IPSE program. That is, and actually I can give you some more specifics. When we are dealing with a young man or woman who is looking to attend the IPSE program, first and foremost, we do make them aware that there are Georgia universities, colleges that do offer this program. We also make them aware if they want to go out of state, that is available to them. If the young man or woman chooses to attend a school out of state, we cannot force them to attend a school in state, but if this young man or woman and their family choose to attend a school out of state, we are paying, I don't want to misspeak, we are paying up to what the state charges. And then after that, the family or that young man or woman is paying the remainder of the fees being charged by that out-of-state school.
So if you have a student that wants to go to
Auburn would be a good.
Auburn or Clemson,
Yes, sir.
and the in-state tuition is $20,000 a year, but the out-of-state tuition to Auburn and Clemson is $25,000 a year. They've got to come up with the $5,000.
That's the correct simple math. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well,
I would also add that that is a two-way street. We do receive young men and women who live in surrounding states
Mhm.
who are attending Georgia universities or Georgia schools, and their VR programs are operating somewhat the same way.
I was just concerned. I know we have a lot of people in the state that their kids would like to go out of state, but they can't afford the out-of-state tuition, and they're pretty much locked into going to school here in Georgia. I don't understand why we even give them a choice. I mean, is there a legal precedent for that, or can we just say these are the schools in Georgia that offer this? It would be you can choose. I think we got a lot of people that would like to be able to do that, to get money to go to school and pay only the difference. But is that a logical question? Why we even give them a choice? We just don't tell them that they offer this program at the University of Georgia and at North Georgia College and at Savannah State, and those are the three colleges you can choose from.
I agree with you 100%. I would like to see every young man or woman who is a Georgia citizen who wants to go to this IPSE program that they stay within the state of Georgia. With our counselors within the 40 offices around the state, their job is to educate that young man or woman with all the information that is available and help them make the most informed decision. We are not in a position to leave options off the table, nor would I want one of our counselors to do so. But I agree with you 100%. There is state money being invested in these young men and women to attend this program, and I would like to see them stay within Georgia. So I agree with you 100%.
Well, apparently the parent wouldn't have to pay anything then if they stayed in state, correct?
There is a economic threshold for some individuals. Currently there are about 144 total students participating in the IPSE program here in Georgia. Out of the 144, GVRA is investing in 128 students who are participating in this program. That investment ranges from a wide range, if you will, of areas. It could be the cost of the school, it could be for technology, it could be for vehicle modification, some instances, it's for a uniform. But in regards to the total number of students participating in this IPSI program, it is 144, and we are investing in 128. That is because of an economic threshold.
Okay, so does that mean there's 16 going out of state?
No, that means, well, I don't want to say no. Some could be going out of state, some could be in a economic position where they are above that economic threshold and don't meet the requirements.
Can I ask what the threshold is?
Yes, you may ask that question. I would have to get back to you on that exact dollar figure. I just don't know off the top of my head.
Can you just give me a good educated guess? I hate for you to have to go back and look that stuff up. I'm interested in this because I don't see why we're educating Georgia kids outside of Georgia when
There are a number of excellent schools: Kennesaw State,
Yeah.
UGA,
Yeah.
Georgia Tech, Georgia State, to name a few.
okay.
I should have started with that. I apologize. I guess I need 2 cups of coffee this afternoon.
All right.
I just don't know that number off
Okay.
the top of my head. I
All right.
apologize.
Thank you very much for answering my questions.
Yes, sir.
Matthew.
That was my question.
Oh,
I wanted to know
question
how
mark.
many slots we had, and you answered that.
ask it again. He's warmed up on it.
Right.
So do we have 144 total slots all the time, or is that
No,
what we're serving?
that is the current number of students that are participating in the IPSI program. I will tell you that over the last 3 state fiscal years, the popularity of this program has jumped dramatically. I will tell you that the economic investment that GVRA is making has also increased dramatically. There are also at least 3 or 4 schools waiting to jump in this, if you will, to participate in all 4 classes.
Okay, Representative Oliver, please.
There's a state rate for hotels that's pretty much imposed on me when I travel. I don't pay the hotel the bill they advertise. I pay a state rate that's contracted. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that you paid the contracted rate at the Westin and not its billable rate. Contracted rate's about $90, and whatever they charge, $200 for the room, you don't pay. Am I right or wrong? So you didn't pay that $200 and something per room? And the government rate is $90?
I'm not sure exactly what it was
102?
in November, but it's definitely a lower rate than the one.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just as follow-up to 2 things here, follow-up to Representative Oliver's comment. I remember being on a board that would schedule in November, because generally it was a slow time going into the holidays. People didn't tend to travel, and could really negotiate great rates, and it was a, it was dealt with as State of Georgia as a commission I served on. The second thing is in terms of sending our youth out of state to schools. We do it in other situations too, such as optometry. We pay for their tuition to go out of school for optometry, but then other states pay for their youth to come to Georgia to our veterinary schools because they don't have one. So there is money that goes back and forth between the different states depending on what's available at the different schools.
Are there any other updates that you have for us on the IPSI program? Particularly, I know we had some hearings this past fall, and I know there's a lot of concern about trying to build up capacity, I would say, particularly, and capacity with rigor and fidelity for these students particularly. I just wondered if you have any more updates or any thoughts as we go into the next year.
Madam Chair, yes, I'd be happy to do that. First and foremost, I believe I mentioned it at the meeting we had a week or 2 ago, but we are always continuously looking to improve our process, making sure we're delivering the best product to our clients, to our coworkers, to the elected officials. And we made first off, a personnel change last fall where the individual who's now overseeing the transition, the IPSI program, is Dr. Lee Brinkley Bryan. She's also overseeing the 2 residential campuses, Roosevelt Warm Springs in Meriwether County, and also Cave Springs in outside of Rome, Georgia. We are currently collaborating and also strengthening this program with the partners. I will tell you that working with Dan Kremens, who spoke at the committee meeting this past fall, October, November, I forget exactly when, meetings have been scheduled with Dan, another one of his coworkers, with Dr. Lee Brinkley Bryan, and also we do have, again, we have 5 programs. One of the programs you oversee is VR. We do have a new director for the VR program, Dr. Christine Fleming, who actually goes back many years working with Dan, and they are sitting down and exploring ways and how we can put some uniformity into this program, how we can help maybe slow the rise of the cost of the program, and also try to make sure and guarantee that when a young man or woman is graduating from one of these programs, if it's Kennesaw State, UGA, Tech, Georgia State, that they are leaving with a industry-wide recognized certificate. That way, if that young man or woman leaves the state of Georgia, if their parent gets a promotion and moves to Cleveland, Ohio, that certificate from Kennesaw State or Destination Dogs UGA carries as much weight in Cleveland, Ohio as it does here. I can tell you, first off, in regards to IPSI, just for a big picture, there are about 250 IPSI programs nationwide. One of the issues, or not issues, one of the topics from last fall was the IPSI teachers. And I do want to follow up with that, and that the U.S. Department of Education no longer funds the salaries for the IPSI teachers. Therefore, working with Dan Kremens and our partners, we are working to redefine the roles of impacting educators on staff. They are currently assisting with a variety of significant efforts related to the delivery of pre-ETs. Meanwhile, curriculum, instruction, and credentials are still remaining a part of our discussion with our IPSI partners. I am very proud of the support that GVRA offers these young men and women, the financial investment. I'm very proud of the strengthening relationship we have with the participating schools, and I look forward to seeing these young men and women graduate every year from these schools with a certificate that can travel, has weight, and watching these young men and women get to work, pay income tax, sales tax, return on investment to the general funds here.
Could you tell me the number of programs again? I missed it. Just you said two.
Nationwide,
Nationwide.
250 IPSI schools nationwide.
Okay.
I will tell you that, unfortunately, working with our fellow, or discussing this with our fellow VR agencies around the country, they are also having these same conversations.
Are any of the other programs involved more in our technical schools than our university systems? Are you aware of any of those?
We do have an excellent program down in Albany with Albany Tech. And they are, these young men and women are leaving with industry-wide certificates, and I'm very proud of that relationship.
Yeah, I just wondered among other states if
Oh,
they've found any particular, if one way is better than the other, or if we're trying to diversify the opportunities, I would say.
We have yet to have the conversation with any of the other 50 states where they have the secret sauce.
Okay.
There are many 50 states. There are right now 50 kind of different ways in how they're moving forward with the IPSI program.
Sure. Well, one thing as we move forward too, I'd like to ask if you could help me with, is I think that the members of this committee probably need to know more about it, and we need a field trip after session, no doubt, to Roosevelt Warm Springs. I'd love to go to Cave Spring too. But for these graduations, as they take place, I think it would be great for us to all know about them. Sometimes I hear, but I think there could be some real benefit to going and seeing and hearing some of those stories. I know some of the speakers. I've been to a couple that have been really just profoundly touching, and each program is different, so you learn a little bit different with every one. So
Well, Madam Chair, I appreciate the time you took and the effort to attend the graduation at Cave Springs this past December, if I'm not mistaken. I always invite every elected official first to come to Roosevelt Warm Springs, either in, I think it's May or June, and then also December, where there are 2 graduations. At those graduations, you will see 75 young adults going across that stage, leaving with industry-wide certificates. Also, out of those young adults who are graduating, 50 to 60% of them at that time of graduation have a job. Talking to them, being reminded why we work hard downtown, but then also talking to their parents. And their parents, for, in some cases, the first time having hope and pride, not pride, but just, I guess maybe pride is a good word, in their son or daughter. And seeing that, I recall a conversation I had with the father, very intimate conversation. He said, this is where taxpayer dollars have to be spent. My son, before he came here, wouldn't talk to you, wouldn't shake your hand, wouldn't look you in the eye. Now, he'll shake your hand, he'll look you in the eye, he won't shut up. And he has a job, and he has confidence, and he has self-worth. And so I highly recommend and invite all elected officials to the Roosevelt Warm Springs and also Cave Springs graduations.
well, I want us to see the 2 campuses as well, not because it is a graduation, but to learn a little bit more about them. So we'll plan some trips this year after session sometime. But in the meantime, those graduations, when they show up on our calendars, I encourage you to try to go.
I will make sure that an invite is sent to everyone for
Thank
both
you.
campuses.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I do not, I do, Representative Mathiak. I'm gonna butcher it. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's okay. You talked about the technical schools in Albany. Is that being expanded throughout the state? The reason I'm asking is the technical school in my community is moving fast and furiously, and I would love to see IPSI included in some of these other technical schools. Is that
I
a
would-
plan?
I'd be more than happy to talk to you offline and set up meetings with the program director, Dr. Lee Brinkley Bryan, and then also maybe even bringing in other stakeholders such as Dan Kremens to help figure out the best way forward to have the local school in your district participate.
Great,
That would
thank
be
you.
that would be easy.
Thank you.
All right, now I think I don't see any other questions, so thank you so much for
Madam
your
Chair,
time.
thank you all.
I appreciate it. And now we will move into the time for comment. So here's what we'll do. Looks like, no. So it looks like we have a good number of people that have signed up, and I'm grateful for that. Why don't we shoot for about 3 or so minutes to try, and I know there may be questions that may go a little bit longer, but let's try to start that way. And I will tell y'all too that if any of you are interested in tomorrow's hearing, we also are going to have time for comment after that. But we're gonna get everybody in. If we need to do more, we'll work on that. Okay? Are there any questions at all on that? Let's use this mic right here. If we need to add any other chairs or move a chair, if anyone needs a chair moved to pull up there for any reason. So our first is Jennifer King with Georgia Casa, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and all the committee members for your time and support. I'm Jennifer King, the new Executive Director of Georgia Casa, Court-Appointed Special Advocates. I'm proud to represent more than 3,000 child advocates, over 90% of whom are community volunteers, or as you know them, CASAs, who make connections every day with children in foster care, seeking to improve the foster care experience and outcomes for families. In previous years, notably fiscal year 17 and 18, this legislature invested in CASA advocacy work in high-need geographic areas. The investment allowed CASA affiliates with the highest populations of children in foster care, primarily in Fulton and DeKalb counties, to expand their readiness and ability to engage and support CASA volunteers, ensuring that more children benefit from the individualized best interest advocacy and constancy that only a CASA volunteer can bring in a child's case. Nearly 3 years later, we have experienced a 20% increase in children served in high-need communities and a 35% increase in children in defects custody statewide. Today and on any given day, CASA volunteers are active in 151 counties, advocating in juvenile courts for more than 7,000 children, including 11 courtrooms in Fulton and DeKalb counties alone. We have and will continue to use this previous support to increase the number of volunteers in our large urban areas. Last year in fiscal year 19, we did not seek an increase in state funding while we continued to maximize our strategic growth efforts to increase the number of volunteers. For fiscal year 20, we are respectively seeking $500,000 to increase the capacity of CASA programs in communities all across the state. The additional funding will afford local CASA programs the ability to invest in heightened recruitment, training, supervision, and quality service delivery. Further, for every state dollar invested, CASA programs raise an additional $3 to support volunteer advocacy. Many of you are aware of CASA advocacy in your home districts and have shared with us the value that committed community volunteers add to your local child welfare systems. Our volunteers will share the impact that CASA has had on them. We also appreciate and acknowledge DFACS's support of this request and CASA's continued advocacy for strong and supported families. And our steadfast commitment remains to bring individualized attention, urgency, and supportive adult connections for each and every child involved in the foster care system. We're happy to provide any additional information requested by this committee, and we thank you for your consideration and support for CASA advocacy.
Representative Reeves.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm new to this committee, so I'm learning as we go here. But is what is presented in the proposed budget, is that what y'all asked for, or is there a difference in that right now?
So we're not in the governor's budget.
Okay.
So we're asking this committee for $500,000.
Okay. Okay, great.
Okay, Representative Benton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Several years ago, I think we did the 500. I think you said we did the 500,000 for Atlanta and DeKalb County. This additional ask that you're asking for now, is it going to go over the whole state, or is it going to be less Atlanta and DeKalb County?
So it's going to go across the whole state,
Okay.
across the whole state as much as we can. If it's the $500,000, if we receive less of that, we have a formula that determines where and how that's distributed based on the need, the number of children in foster care in those areas, and the performance. So we'll have to move some things around.
The additional caseloads that you had, that you've gotten in the last year and a half, where has that been mainly, as far as, is it been all over the state, or is it mainly in one area of the state, or?
Yes, the increase in the foster care population, I would say it's been all over. It's really the capacity of our CASA programs and areas to be able to serve more children has been all over as well. So we're trying to keep up with the increase in the foster care population, and certainly now we've started to see it tick down a little bit.
You said that it was in 151 counties. Is there a reason that those other 8 counties don't have any volunteers, or they just can't find them?
Well, we serve upon invitation of the judge. So whenever the juvenile court judges in those remaining counties are open and welcome for CASA volunteers to come in and support the work that they're doing, we're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Reeves, is yours?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think I might have hit it 1, 2 minutes. I
That's
don't have a
okay.
question.
That's okay. I'm sorry, I don't know. Your microphone is just not lighting us up, so you feel free over there to raise your hand, Representative
I
Benton, if we don't
will,
see it.
thank you. I just have a question. If the 500,000's not in the governor's budget, is that a 500,000 increase?
It is an increase.
Okay, so how much are we currently funding y'all at?
$3.37 million.
Okay. And you've explained already what the additional monies are used for, so thank you. I just needed that clarification.
Mathiak. Representative Mathiak. Yeah, we're sitting here going like, between us like, what's going on with those two microphones? Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam
No, this is a
Chair.
difficult room. It's a little bit different than what y'all are used to or we are. So excuse me.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to say thank you because I got introduced to CASA my first session here at the Capitol, and I can't tell you how invaluable CASA is for the children of Georgia, and thank you, Georgia, for all that you do and the days that you spend here. I would like you to talk a little bit about recruitment because 500,000 isn't enough to recruit for our whole state. I'd like to advocate for that just because I know what happens in my communities and trying to advocate to bring people in. So could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. And this specific ask goes to fund positions, so local staff members who are out recruiting, talking with anyone that they might know. They're also training those volunteers, screening them, and then we'll support them once they're on there. So largely staff positions. We at the Georgia CASA office supplement the produce recruitment materials and try to add on to what's being done at a local level, at a regional and state level in terms of raising awareness. So we know that volunteers are more likely to come to us when someone comes up to them and tells them they'd be a great volunteer. So that word of mouth and that personal contact really makes the difference.
Madam Chair, can I follow up? Can you give me an average of how many volunteers in a community, in a county?
Sure. An average CASA program, our CASA programs are set up by county and sometimes judicial circuit, so they might serve multiple counties. I would say on average our CASA programs have anywhere from 40 to 60 volunteers.
Okay.
We train nearly 1,000 volunteers every year.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Representative Reeves, for real, right?
For real this time. I just was able to look at this. So this $500,000 is for additional paid supervisors, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, great, awesome.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the work that you do and that you encourage others to do.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So next we have Melanie McNeil, State Ombudsman.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, I'm here today to ask for some funding in the state fiscal year 2020 budget. So the easy one is we had some money in the amended 19 budget. It's $26,423, so a pretty small amount that we're using for training our ombudsman representatives. The residents that we serve are sicker and frailer than some years ago, and so resolving complaints is complicated. It's important for us to train our ombudsman representatives somewhat regularly because those complaints can be really challenging. But in addition, we have a new way to describe our complaints. We're going from 131 complaint categories down to 60. And so helping to make sure that our ombudsman representatives are accurate in how they're describing their work is important, both for the federal government and for the state government. Our funding is slightly more federal than state. It's about 51% federal funding and actually 46% state, and a small amount that's local funding and grants. And so it's a pretty small amount, but it didn't get put into the 2020 budget. It was only in the amended budget. So I'm requesting that you put that small amount in for us. And it would ordinarily be at the Department of Human Services budget under section 28.9, which is elder abuse investigations and prevention. Not all of the work that we do is elder abuse investigation, but some of it is. Some of that happens in nursing homes and personal care homes and assisted living communities. The other request I have is related to the personal needs allowance. So that's the second page that you have. we didn't really have a chance to talk with Governor Kemp before he put his budget forward about the other $5 of the $20,000 that the General Assembly approved in 2017 to increase the personal needs allowance. So if you remember last year, the governor put in $10, and the General Assembly so graciously added the other $5 for $15. So we're asking for $5 more, which I'm not really sure on the math, so we'd have to check with the budget office to be sure that it's the right amount. But I think in looking at what was appropriated last year in this committee's budget, I think what we would be looking at this year is a little under $145,000. So that would increase for residents in nursing homes who are on Medicaid. It would allow them to have actually $70 a month to spend for clothing, birthday presents, cards, snacks, special lotions or shampoos or other things that they would like to have. A telephone, because nursing homes don't provide in-room telephones. So we're asking for that too. And I know, Madam Chair, you got all those letters. So we had 678 letters so far, and I had an email today that we've got more to come. So the residents are very appreciative. So I'd ask you to consider that in the budget this year.
Very kind, too. I do have some lovely letters. I do. If anyone wants to come help me read them.
There's a bunch.
They are. No, that's very, very kind. I appreciate it. Are there any questions from the committee on this item? Looks like there are none. Thank you,
Thank you.
Melanie. Thank you for educating us well, too. Okay, so next, Maureen Kelly for the Georgia Council on Aging. Sure.
Good afternoon. She's back.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee, for your attention. I'm Maureen Kelly. I'm the legislative chair for the Georgia Council on Aging, the body that's charged to actually make recommendations to the governor and the administration. The Council and Coalition of Advocates for Georgia's Elderly does support and thanks the governor for the fiscal year 2020 funding recommendations. However, the council also respectfully requests larger investments for the following reasons. The Aging and Disability Resource Center request is for $4 million in funding to handle increased call volume and to develop a market statewide public-facing website for consumers. For the DHS budget, you'll find it under Elder Support Services, and the governor's recommendation was $338,802. Elder Community Living Services also has a category that we request $10 million to increase the funding to serve additional clients with non-Medicaid, home and community-based services. For DHS budget under Elder Community Living Services, the governor's recommendation is $1,898,000 for 1,000 slots. The older adult population continues to grow. 1 in 7 Georgians are age 65 or older, soon to be 1 in 5, that's 20%. That's a very large older population, and it's projected that almost 70% of them will need long-term care services and supports. In order to adequately position Georgia to best respond to this growth, we didn't just come here with our hands out. We did our homework, and we targeted those cost centers that are a win-win to not only help older Georgians, but to also focus on fiscally responsible investment strategies for Georgia's budget. And those areas are the two that we've mentioned, and I'll explain. Supporting non-Medicaid home and community-based services helps prevent or delay far more costly institutional care. There are currently 7,000 people, older adults, on waiting lists to receive these services. The longer the wait, the more they are at risk for premature nursing home assistance or for admissions or even victimization of abuse, elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. I was really glad to see Representative Donahue doing the math when Commissioner Crittenton was speaking, Because when you divide this out, what may sound like a bold request isn't going to go as far as you might think. It is not a pie-in-the-sky request. The state saves money when older adults in need of services remain at home instead of moving to a nursing facility. The average cost of a non-Medicaid home and community-based person receiving services is $1,898. That's almost $2,000 per person versus $21,250, which is the annual state share of a Medicaid nursing home bed. Similarly, the ADRC information centers serve seniors and their families in need of supportive services. Now, they first provide information about services that are available and appropriate that are private pay services. So assistive technology and other solutions, local home and community-based programs in the counties before determining any eligibility for state-funded programs. They're not throwing state-funded services at people. Centers assist those seeking to help find services so that they can assume personal responsibility for their own particular situations. State-funded services are actually offered as a last resort. And if I may tell a personal story, I wasn't going to share this before, but in his last years, my dad was here under our care. And the days that I had to go to work, we had to come up with many different solutions to have him eat and get the nutrition that he needed. And he never did so unless there was somebody there with him because of his depression and other physical health conditions. So we came up with a lot of different plans, neighbors to help and people helping as much as possible. But I also, having been in the Aging Network at the time, reached out to the county-based program to see if we could get him on a home-delivered meal, Meals on Wheels. At the time, they did not have any route in our area. And so we put him on the waiting list. Probably the saddest days of my life were the day my dad died and the day 8 months after his death, I got a call from the county saying, "Good news, we have a route in your area now." I mean, I have to point out that older adults don't have the luxury of time to wait. There's far less time ahead of them than there are years behind them. They're not going to stay on these services forever. And yet, a 7,000 person waiting list waiting that long is not adequate to position Georgia where it needs to be when we are actually addressing the largest population of older adults in history. Do the math. Thank you for your consideration of these requests. Any questions?
Let's see, is it Representative Henson?
Just one, on the 7,000 on the waiting list, are they all adults or a combination?
It's primarily older adults, but it does include persons with disabilities. And when I saw Representative Donahue doing the math and that $2,700 of the meals, that was a part of it, which is what broke my heart again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Kirby.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there more
Got
questions?
one more, yeah.
Sure.
Representative Kirby.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kind of related to the whole subject matter, I believe it's 2011, 2012, is when we changed the three license levels to personal care, assisted living, and skilled care or nursing home. I still get constituents complaining, not a great number, but quite a bit. They think mom or dad needs some help. The first thing that comes to their mind is the word assisted living, which is a very specific license level now. Do you see that? Because I know we had one time talked about changing that and coming up with different naming structure where assisted living would be more generic for people to go. Is that still a problem, or is it just a smaller group that I'm hearing from?
I don't think it's as much a problem as it is confusion. And
that's the problem. They're confused. Why mom needs assisted living, but she
because there
really
are the
needs
two
personal
levels.
care.
Yes, and I will say that is exactly where the call centers at the ADRCs can really help people sort through, because they will call with an idea in their head about what mom and dad need, and they are actually highly skilled, highly trained people answering these phones who know how to sort through what is available for them and what is going to be appropriate for them.
So there still is an opening there where we might ought to look at trying to make it less confusing for the general public.
Well, I think the solution exists with the ADRCs, if we could adequately fund them for more people to get through.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I don't see any.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one more. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is, out of the 7,000 on the waiting list, what parts of the state do you have that breakdown of where they may be, or?
I'm sure it's available, and we could get that to you.
I can pass it out.
Okay.
I actually have a map.
Okay.
Mhm.
The other question is, what are the these are seniors that are above what age?
Oh, well, there's two ways of looking at it. Typically, the programs that are funded begin at 60 plus.
Okay.
In fact, some of the numbers that you listened to about the population of 65 plus are probably underestimated when you consider that our programs begin at 60 plus. That begins with the Federal Older Americans Act eligibility.
So there probably are more people that are not reported.
Oh, absolutely. There are more people that don't call for services. There are more, yes.
So that number would go higher.
Absolutely is higher.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not going to get up yet. I'm sorry.
Yeah, make that, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one. The facility that we have in my community, does that facility receive funding from the state too? Or is that all local? I'm not even sure.
The requests we were making were for non-Medicaid services, but when people don't get those services, then they are usually at risk for having to enter Medicaid state-supported services under Medicaid at a lot more money, a lot more state funding. Excuse me, I didn't make that clear. But, and Steve, you're welcome to chime in here. I'm not sure what your facility in your area is.
I think you might be able to, pardon me?
Are you referring to the senior center?
I am.
Where we
Okay,
met?
okay.
I am.
Some of the senior centers are funded through some state funding and federal funding, and I do believe that the Griffin one is, but some senior centers are funded by counties or cities, like Duluth has a fabulous senior center, is funded just by the city. So it really differs all across the board.
Okay, so this state funding could pay for food, because I know that in my senior center, they serve, I believe, breakfast and lunch. So is that state funded or partially state funded?
It could be, but it is most likely partially state
Gotcha.
funded. Because
Okay.
they have federal funds, they have state funds, they usually have some county funds, and then they do private fundraising also.
Gotcha.
So you usually see that entire mix wherever you are.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you so much.
You know, and I know, as you can hear, all of these issues matter so much to this committee, and we have a lot of questions. We are time challenged. I'm not trying to rush anybody, but here's what I want to let y'all know right from the front. We have to be out of this room at 3. I've just been told there's no cushion time in there. I don't want you to rush. If anyone feels like you would have more availability tomorrow or could come back, I want to do that. I understand some of you have traveled with people, and so I don't want to make that hard. Just if I call out your name and you're like, ooh, I can wait, that's fine. If not, come on up. So I think next is Mary Leah Boatwright Quinn. Am I saying all that right? Maybe close.
All right, Chair Dempsey, thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Chair Dempsey and members of the subcommittee. I'm here representing the Alzheimer's Association Georgia chapter. I'm Mary Lee Boatwright Quinn, and I am the Advocacy and Public Policy Manager. And we're here to speak in support of investing additional dollars to the Elder Community Living Services, also known as Home and Community-Based Services. And I will be well under my 3 minutes, but wanted to share with you why the Alzheimer's Association supports this by sharing some of the Alzheimer's facts for Georgia. The number of people with an Alzheimer's diagnosis that doesn't include the other dementias is expected to increase in Georgia by over 35% by 2025. Alzheimer's is the most expensive disease in America, and that is in grand part due to the fact that once someone is taking care of somebody at home, they end up in those more expensive long-term care services paid for by Medicaid. And in 2018, Georgia spent $1.1 million in Medicaid costs for people living with Alzheimer's. In addition, in 2015, the dementia patient hospital readmission rate was 21.1% in Georgia, and that was just for dementia patients. And these home and community-based services, when they are brought into the home to help a caregiver, help reduce those hospital readmissions. We know that. And so that's why these services are so important to the people living with some type of dementia in Georgia. And we would ask, we are so grateful for the almost $1.9 million that the governor put into the budget for these services and recommended in the budget, but we would love to see that increased. Thank you so much for your time. Does anybody have any questions?
I don't see any questions. I do not. Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do too, Prue. And I'm apologizing for how cold it is. I don't know if y'all are shivering, but if you see us up here, if you see us up here, I don't know. I'm looking around for a thermostat, but I don't. You're welcome to go try it if you want to. You want to try it? See what's that. We're going to look and see if that's thermostat. But we'll move right on here with John Randolph Gates. It's going to keep us awake, though, for sure.
Yes, it will. Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Dawn Randolph, representing the Georgia Association for Training, Employment, and Supports for People with Disabilities, and I will pass out our little handout.
Reeves, can you, well, here we go.
Thank you all for taking your time today. We actually have many members of Gates, and the community rehab providers are across the state. They're in Augusta, they're in Easton, Georgia, they're in Vidalia, they're everywhere, 159 counties with groups like Goodwills and Easter Seals and Bobby Dodd and Tommy Nobis and New Ventures, and we have 13 members, and I could go on and on. What I want to first point out to you is that Georgia Vocational Rehab dollars come as a match from the federal government. It's called $110, where every dollar that we put in, we get a $4 match. One of the best matches in the state. And these services go throughout the communities for providing supports to people with disabilities to get jobs, job training, job coaching, everywhere. And what we know is right now we leave about $22 million on the table at the federal level. So when we do that, other states take that money that Georgians, our allocation is based on our tax base, based on our federal revenue, and they reallocate that out to other states. So we're leaving at least $22 million on the table every year. So a lot of the things that you were asking is how do we get folks into jobs and into work? I want to thank you all for in the 2015 session, you actually allocated $900,000 more to GVRA, which pulled down almost $4 million. And then in the 2017 session, you allocated $500,000, which pulled down about $2 million. So we've been inching up to try to pull that down. And we are now at a gap of about $5.9 million that we need to match that $22 million. One of the things that I want to point out and then just move on to our other incredible providers is on the back of the handout that I gave you, you'll see a flow chart. And as you see that graph, when GVRA was moved from the Department of Labor to be an attached independent agency at DHS, we saw that we had a revenue drop of community rehab providers. And our low point was in 2014, which is why in 2015 we advocated to get funding into GVRA. And unfortunately, one of the things I want to point out to you is we don't have a request this year because every year that we've asked for more money and you've provided it, the rehab providers haven't seen that comparable increase in services. They are serving more people with the same amount of money. And that is something that I would like to tee up as you hear from these providers, there's got to be a way, because the community rehab organizations are in your communities, that we can serve more folks with the dollars that we've been advocating for each time that you've appropriated them. So I want to just tee that up and get our folks up here to talk with you. Okay, thank you very much.
So we just move on down. Okay, so great. Next is Jenny Taylor with Goodwill, North Georgia. Thank you. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. We very much appreciate your time and attention and staying to listen. Goodwill of North Georgia placed 24,902 Georgians into employment just last fiscal year. We are an agency that represents all of the Goodwills across the state, and we are an organization that brings primarily private dollars to help draw down more federal dollars to Georgia by doing things like our SNAP employment and training contract. Every dollar that we bring gets reimbursed 50% through the federal government through DFACs. We serve folks who receive TANF, and we serve folks through the Voc Rehab Agency. We are the largest community rehab provider for the VR program. And what I want to leave with you before I let Alex tell you his story is that every dollar that you invest comes back to the state through an increase in taxes paid, through reduction in public benefit for the right reasons, because people have moved to self-sufficiency, not because of sanctions or limits. And aside from the monetary amount of dollars, the return on dignity, I know many of you have seen and heard. The piece of paper that I handed out to you is an economic impact study of 809 individuals. It's unlike other impact studies in that it doesn't use broad formulas. It actually follows those individuals, how much they were using in public benefit, and after the job training programs that they were in, like Goodwill and many of our peer groups, what the return on was for those specific people. And so I encourage you to read the full report, but I can tell you all day long, but better, I would love for you to hear from Alex.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Alexandra Varla. I'm a job coach at Goodwill of North Georgia. I was born and raised in Romania, and I moved into the United States after the end of college. Of high school, I'm so sorry. I moved into the States without speaking any English, other than a very few words like hi, bye, and thank you. Really basic. And it's needless to say that for me it was a little bit of a challenge to find employment for various reasons, such as, like I mentioned, I didn't speak any English. I have a visible disability, and I wasn't driving at the time, so I had no reliable transportation. So I've been looking for a job for 6-7 months until I heard about GVRA, and a counselor from GVRA got me in contact with Goodwill of North Georgia, and that was the first time when I got to be served by their training programs. I was assigned to great job coaches and case managers who helped me build my self-esteem to the point where I learned the soft skills of a job. I was named the employee of the participant of the month for 3 consecutive weeks, and then I was named the participant of the month, and then I was hired by the Goodwill of North Georgia as a regular employee. Through the help of GVRA and Goodwill of North Georgia, like I said, I built my self-esteem. I made it through ESL classes, and then later in 2011, I have decided to get a career shift, and I went back to school. I have graduated from University of North Georgia. I heard somebody mentioning University of North Georgia, UNG. I've graduated from UNG in 2016 with a GPA of 3.86, 3.87. I had financial aid throughout college, And then I was hired as a permanent employee by Goodwill of North Georgia. And ever since then, I have been a job coach with Goodwill of North Georgia and been promoted once as a job coach too. So I would urge everybody to continue to help people who need a second chance and advertise all of the great programs and trainings that all of the our agency and GVI has to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. One last point to some questions that you had earlier. Goodwill of North Georgia does support some of the IPSI folks that are in Athens at the Destination Jogs program. We also have 8 technical college partnerships where we do co-enrollment. And I can tell you that for the students who go through our programs, whether they have a disability like Alex or another barrier to employment, those completion rates for the programs that are on average through TCSG are 20%. When you partner with Goodwill of North Georgia, 85% of the students become completers and go to work, and we follow them for a year and beat the national average in the top 10% of the nation. It is a highly effective program, moving people from a first job to a better job to a career. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Alex, too, particularly. Chairman Ben.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Several years ago, we moved the GVRA out of Department of Labor and to a standalone agency. Have you seen any difference in the service from when it was with the Department of Labor and as a standalone agency, and which one is, I'd like to hear your experience on it, please.
Yes. Well, first, when that occurred, as Don mentioned, there was a significant drop in dollars available to match to the federal government. And I can tell you that our contract which was about $4 million annually of services to people like Alex, we had a $2 million deficit and had to lay off more than 60 people from our organization as a result of that. Many of the other members of Gates had more significant impacts because they're much smaller and don't have the resources of Goodwill. It took a long time for the state to move past closing all priority categories to begin to serve people again. And a whole graduating class of students with disabilities did not receive services that year. And it was a shame because of the year that they happened to graduate, they didn't have transition services like all of the other students before them. The state has made some improvements to come back, but it is nowhere near the levels that it was in the past. A lot of the dollars are not drawn down. They're not passed through to the local private organizations who can use those dollars as match. So, for example, Goodwill of North Georgia, only 6% of our budget comes from government sources. We match the rest from all the generous donors and shoppers of our stores to contribute to that. So, while they have made progress, it is not back to what it used to be to serving the people of Georgia who have disabilities.
One more question, Madam Chair. One more question. The drawdown of federal dollars when it was with the Department of Labor, did y'all see those additional dollars, or were they used in other programs in the Department of Labor?
That is a very good question. We saw more dollars when it was under the Department of Labor. I can fairly say that, than we see today. We are at just our organization alone is at 60% of the capacity that we were at serving Voc Rehab clients. We have contracts with every state agency that we have in our fine state. And we have had to diversify our revenue and increase our private sources to supplement so that we can continue to grow and not leave anybody behind.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for doing that as well. Thank you all. Next, I believe it's Adam Hinchliff. Great.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of this committee. Obviously, with the time, I will be brief with remarks as I can. Good afternoon. My name is Adam Hinchliff. I'm the Executive Affairs Manager at the Center for the Visually Impaired here in Atlanta. We're Georgia's largest fully accredited
full-service vision rehabilitation center. I'm here for two roles. I am a proud former client of the Vocational Rehabilitation Program. In addition, I became or joined the CVI staff in 2017 and became aware of the drastic difference in the referral process for my fellow Georgians who are blind or visually impaired going through the vocational rehabilitation program right now. Just as some examples, we used to serve over 100 VR applicants, including myself, when I was a client of the center back around 2010, 2011. That has decreased to this year so far, midway through FY 2019, we're serving 14. And obviously that's had a drastic impact on our operations. For example, in preparing for this committee, tracking the constituents who contact us either for services from Center for the Visually Impaired alone or in partnership with Vocational Rehabilitation, I reached out to 77 constituents. All were referred to Vocational Rehabilitation from CVI after contacting us first. 58 replied back to me. Of those, 14 have stated that they have not heard any communication from Vocational Rehabilitation whatsoever. Of the 58, 23 said that they are still in the eligibility or what I call the paperwork process, and for some of those individuals, that process has been going on from 4 to 6 months. This is the number I want to leave with you today. Out of the 77 individuals or constituents who contacted us and the 58 who returned a phone call or an email to me, 3 reported that they are currently vocational rehabilitation clients. Just 3. The remaining 18 gave various reasons for why they're not working with VR right now. Some had relocated out of state, but others simply told me that they just gave up with the process. So this obviously is a former VR client who had a terrific experience. This troubled me very much because I know that for this 77 who reached out to us, I know there are hundreds, if not thousands, more Georgians who are blind or visually impaired that are not receiving services. And so I just wanted to come and talk to you all today to let you know that myself and Center for the Visually Impaired want to be a partner and want to work to make as many Georgians who are blind or visually impaired, like myself, go to work or return to the workforce. Thanks to the partnership of Vocational Rehabilitation and Center for the Visually Impaired, I was able to complete my master's degree in political science with a 4.0 GPA. And currently, I purchased my home 2 years ago, and I am actively contributing to Georgia's robust economy, which is, as you know, one of the best in the nation, by being a gainfully employed taxpayer. This is something that I want for all of my fellow Georgians who are blind and visually impaired who choose to go through the vocational rehabilitation program. So I just want to leave you with this. The mission of the Center for the Visually Impaired is simple. It's to empower those impacted by vision loss to live with independence and dignity. VR and CVI was able to do that for me. And my hope is, moving forward, that we can do that for everyone else who chooses to go through vocational rehabilitation who's blind and visually impaired. Thank you, Madam Chair and the committee, for allowing me to share my thoughts and my VR story with you.
Thank you, Adam, for sharing. Thank you. That's very powerful. And I've had you visit my office before and
Yes, ma'am.
heard your story and heard about some of the great ideas you have that could really help. So thank you. I believe Chairman Benton has a question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Representative.
Yes, Adam, I wanted to ask you, when you were a client of VR, was that when it was in the Department of Labor or when it was standalone?
Yes, sir. I was a member of the last class of under Department of Labor in 2011, 2012. So
Okay.
I was under the old DOL agency makeup.
Can you give any kind of testimony to say whether or not the service has been better, the service was better under the Department of Labor or when it's a standalone agency?
Sure. What I could say for myself is that for me, a lot of the vocational A lot of the main services that I used was under DOL. I did have some minor services, mainly through job placement services with CVI at that time into 2012 and up to my graduation. But the evidence that I have been shown is that since we've moved, or since VR has moved from the Department of Labor to a standalone agency, that services have dropped precipitously. I can say in FY 2016, we had seen 53 referrals to CVI from VR. By 2018, that had dropped to 33. And of course, I told you all right now in FY 2019, we're serving 14.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you,
I
committee.
do see one other question, one more.
Okay, pardon me.
Yeah, the drop, right here, the drop that you have experienced, so there are some underserved or not served blind citizens in the state of Georgia.
Yes, sir.
How many do you have a count on that?
Well, I don't have a statewide figure. I do know that some of the data that I've seen is that, now this is the entire population spanning all areas of vision loss, but I've seen it between 700 and 900,000 Georgians. I can tell you in calendar year 2018, 132 constituents had contacted Center for the Visually Impaired to inquire about our services or vocational rehabilitation. However, I can tell you in doing this survey research, not all of the constituents who called us live in our service area. So they may have, there's two other vision service providers in the state. The Savannah Center for Blind and Low Vision covers our coastal counties as well as southeast Georgia. We cover kind of the heart of metropolitan Atlanta, and then maybe in an arc going from Gainesville to Athens to just north of Macon. And then Vision Rehabilitation Services of Georgia kind of covers the northwest quadrant of the state. So I don't have the numbers that they may have seen, but I know that we have seen around 130 to 140 inquiries. But in terms of the data that I conducted myself, was it just from July to December, of the 77, just 3 are current clients and 23 are still in the paperwork process, with 14 having no formal contact, according to them.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'm going to tell y'all the other committee is starting to come in, and if we could take a few minutes and do just a couple of more quick statements, and then tomorrow afternoon we do have plenty of time built in for more comment. And I do apologize for that, but that is the reality of doing business in this building, and I know you all are aware of that. So next is Veronica Rohrlach from Bobby Dodd Institute. And if anyone, like I said, if I call your name and you can wait, let me know.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee members. I appreciate you taking time to listen to some of our stories. I do work with Bobby Dodd Institute. I serve as the Senior Vice President of Operations, and just wanted to come and provide you just, again, our commitment to partnering with the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation Services to provide employment supports, trainings, job coaching, and actual jobs in our communities. That is something that is near to Bobby Dodd. We've actually been, if you're familiar with Coach Dodd, we've been around for about 60 years as a program, started under another agency, AADD. But we have joined forces back again with AADD and now provide comprehensive services. But it is, employment's one of the things that is near and dear to our heart. Self-sufficiency is one of the number one goals, and it is our mission here at Bobby Dodd. And we cannot do that without our GVRA partner. We have had to rely on a lot of other means to help support individuals with disabilities in the workforce. And we have also seen a shift and decline in the referrals coming to our agency, a reduction of 75% that it was 3 years ago. So there has been a huge decline in that, where we would serve over 1,000 individuals a year, getting placements and hiring. We're now down to serving over 200 individuals. And we've looked at other diversified funding streams to help continue our service to those individuals. And I want to be mindful of your time, and you've heard this story, but we did provide some information and some stories in our packet and some additional information. And if you have any questions, I can take those now, but also you can reach out to us.
Thank you for the packet. I appreciate that from you very, very much. So I do believe we have one question from Chairman Benton right now.
Yes.
Thank you. Ask you the same question I've asked the other people that were sitting there. Since the agency has been moved out of Department of Labor, have you seen a decline in services?
We have seen a decline in referrals. Again, it has, I've actually been with the agency for only a year, but I have worked with GVRA services for over 20 years. So in the last 3 years, I can say consistently it has been a decline in referrals and support. There's a lot of difficulties in getting connection to VR services. I will give you a personal scenario with my own daughter. She is of transition age, and she is 2 months from turning 18, still in the high school setting, and we have consistently been asking since she turned 16 to have GVRA at the table for her transition plan, and we have yet to see a GVRA counselor.
Okay, thank you.
So, any other questions?
I'm so sorry. Thank you for sharing that with us. It matters, and I appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Okay, we can maybe squeeze in one more fast one. So I'm going to ask, is there anyone that absolutely, there are 4 more people on the list, but is there anyone that absolutely cannot come tomorrow or would rather have more time for us to actually talk tomorrow? Are we good to go? You cannot come back? Okay.
I would just like to do a summation very quickly.
Oh, okay. Give us a quick, do us a quick, quick.
I want to give you these really quickly. They're programs that we offer.
Then I think we have one other person that said they cannot come back. So let's see if we can squeeze y'all in real fast. We'll
I'm
try.
Lynn Smith with Easter Seals,
Yes.
East Georgia. I'm also the Gates president this year, and you heard from Gates. Just in summation, I would have to say that the trend is definitely serving less and less people each year. In the era prior with the Department of Labor, I think the numbers for people served in Georgia with disabilities through Voc Rehab Services was around 42,000 people. It's down to about 34,000. There's a drop. What concerns us is the population is increasing in Georgia, 8th largest state, but we only spend a rate the 46th amount of all the states in what we spend for rehabilitation services. We're not drawing down the federal dollars the way we should. And if we did draw down the federal dollars, we'd have so much more money to serve other people. It is difficult. I'm going to reinforce what other people said. It's difficult to work through the GVRA system now to get authorizations. My facility's down to 40% capacity. I think that's a trend throughout all the facilities. We're all down in people that are being referred to us and how much of our capacity is being utilized. Rural areas are not being touched, okay? If we could build our service, develop our service and our levels of service, we could be reaching out and building up services in the other communities. It's very troubling. I know the Goodwill folks, she indicated they've become flexible in where they get their monies. Those 2 programs that I sent the sheets around, they started out as partnerships with GVRA, but the funding went away, so we reached out to United Way and got other funding because they're such important programs to us. Granted, that's what businesses do. However, there's a lot of people not being served and a lot of waiting, okay? And I always call it couch university. People come in for service, and it takes so long, they give up, and they don't get out in the community, and they don't get the independence that they deserve. So, anybody have any questions? Or I answered your question already, I think.
I want to make sure that I understood you correctly, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Sorry.
That the service has decreased since the GVRA was moved out of the
Yes,
Department
sir.
of Labor.
Yes, sir. And the complexities of how to obtain service have increased.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thank you, and I apologize for
I-
asking you to be quick.
Thank you so
sorry.
much. I did my best.
Oh, you did great. You did great. So there's one more, I think, that come on up with us, and let's see if we can do real quick and at least get your message.
Thank you, Madam Chair and the committee. I will be brief. And some of you heard me yesterday in another meeting, so, but
Introduce yourself.
yeah, I will,
Sarah.
but it
It's
bears
Sarah,
repeating.
right?
Yes. My name is Sarah Embro, and I am before you today to bring awareness to and highlight the needs of Georgia's ALS community. I am the Executive Director of the ALS Association Georgia Chapter, and we are the only nonprofit organization working solely towards a world without ALS. However, in the meantime, our focus is to identify and provide resources that will enable this vulnerable community to experience the best quality of life while on this journey. ALS is a terminal disability with a life expectancy of 2 to 5 years if one is lucky. With no known cause, treatment, or cure, the medical focus is on managing the symptoms of a debilitating disease. It's a non-discriminating disease, and it strikes without warning. There are no lifestyle choices that can prevent the disease onset. Thus, families are not prepared financially or emotionally to deal with the disease trajectory. The ALS Association works in partnership with other community organizations to provide care, resources, and support. So today, we are here in support of continued and additional funding for home and community-based services. HCBS funding and support for community-based care for non-Medicaid recipients does enable individuals living with ALS to remain in their home throughout the disease trajectory and allow caregivers, who are oftentimes the spouses, to earn an income needed to manage daily financial needs. Studies indicate that ALS can cost a patient approximately $320,000 from time of diagnosis to death. The bulk of this cost is directly connected to long-term home care, which is not covered by traditional insurances. HCBS can ease the burden for those in need, and we are grateful for the additional funds requested by the governor and ask that you support this request. In addition to HCBS, we also support the additional funding requested by the governor for the Aging Disability Resource Center. And as you know, the ADRC is a collaborative effort of the Administration of Aging and the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services designed to streamline access to long-term care. Given the complexity and severity of ALS, individuals living with ALS and their families really need a simplified place to find high-quality information, services, and community supports. The ALS Association Georgia Chapter works in partnership with the Area of Aging to assist families in maximizing benefits funding through this program. And being able to communicate the urgency regarding disease trajectory, individuals eligible have received care via the Medicaid ICWP. Caregivers have capitalized on the programs and services offered in partnership with the Rosalind Carter Institute to nurture the needs of the entire family. We do provide care and services for individuals in all 159 counties. Duplication of community-based services in all regions can ensure that no matter the demographics, everyone will access to quality care and support. To accomplish this, we ask that funding be allocated to provide this opportunity. Thank you for letting me make this at the very end.
Excellent, and you may not think it, but we did hear you.
Okay.
And I know,
I know I was very
appreciate it
fast.
So much. So here's what I want to tell you before we go. If you have anything else that you feel you can leave with us or leave with someone to tell tomorrow,
Yes.
please do. Tomorrow, our meeting is in 415 CLOB 1 to 4. We're going to be hearing DBHDD and veterans, but I want to tell you what, there are two of you particularly, Wayne Drummond and Ellen Reynolds, and if y'all will work out with us, you can either speak first before they do, or if you want to come back at the end, whatever. Just know that you have a place at the table, okay? Thank you so much, and thank you for
Thank you for the allowance.
being here. This concludes today's meeting.